Hello, and welcome to Confessions of a Terrible Leader, where real leaders share the raw truth about the lessons they learned the hard way, so you don't have to. Join our host, Lacey Nelson, founder of Transcend Leadership Collective and former terrible leader. Every leader can become worthy of being followed if they are willing to put in the work. On this podcast, we share the messy stories and behind-the-scenes reality of what the work actually entails. We welcome you to this community of revolutionary leaders who believe honest communication, healthy conflict, and building cultures of acceptance, respect, and trust are not only possible, but non-negotiable for cultivating world-class teams.
Hello again, listeners, and welcome back to Confessions of a Terrible Leader. I'm your host and former terrible leader, Lacey Nelson. And today we have Heather Criswell with us. And let me tell you a little bit about this woman. She is the culmination of an amazing life experience, has dabbled in a lot of opportunities for leadership. She's written books, she's written curriculums, she has worked with adults, she has worked with educators, she has worked with children. She spans this amazing spectrum of people that she has impacted their lives. And what she does, this common thread that runs through this, is her incredible ability to help people understand, get excited about, and then actually execute that one conversation that can change your life. She is an expert at communicating and is really interested in helping us as a society, and especially kids, younger people, learn how to, maybe for the first time, connect on a really deep level and talk to each other, for some of us at that intimate level for the first time. How'd I do, Heather? Did I nail it?
I love it. I'm like, oh, I kind of like her. You know, when you talk about you, when somebody talks about you, you're like, oh, I can kind of like myself again and fall back in love with myself again. I've always fought this expert title, quote unquote. And one of my dear friends said to me, an expert just means that you literally replay the tape over and over and over again on every single situation that you're an expert in, via, let's just call it communication, right? And it's true. Every single communication that I do, I replay my, should I have said it this way? Could I have done it this way? And my other friend talks about being genius in that space. So we have these words, but at the end of the day, it's just us practicing over and over again. And quite frankly, I've beat myself up 1,000 times. So when you said that introduction, I'm like, oh, I kind of like Heather again. Thank you.
You're so welcome. And yeah, it's reps at bat, right? Or it's reps. It's just times at bat. I should never use sports analogies because I say things like reps at bat. It's just getting your reps in and committing to the study of it and staying on top of the trend. So if you could be so kind, Heather, and share some of your insight with us, what are some of the trends that you're seeing right now? What are some things that are trending with communication, the good, the bad, and the ugly?
Well, you know, there's a couple of things that are really near and dear to my heart with communication and kids in particular. I've worked with over 30,000 kids for the past 30 years. And what I will tell you is the kids 30 years ago are very different than the kids now. And I have just been listening to quite a few studies. He authored a book, and I can't remember his name right off the top of my head, but it's called The Anxious Generation. And it talks about how our generation of kids that have now been subjected to smartphones, and this spiked in 2012. They said it was like a hockey stick of spike of how much mental illness. And I can just tell you, with the kids that I am now involved with launching my product to help them communicate, they are hungry. They are just dying to be able to have a conversation because there's so many things in our world now that are prohibiting that for them. Listen, I'm not here to judge. I am in this boat. Mm-hmm. I own my own business, so I am on my phone. My son's like, mom, you know, communication expert. And I'm here. You know, so there is a real world of like, my business is on my phone. I am an independent contractor. I am a solopreneur, you know, so there are real things here that are happening. But what I will tell you is our kids are longing for conversation. Our kids are not learning how to communicate with each other anymore. My godson comes to me and says, I'm going to break up with my girlfriend. And I was like, ooh, and he's like, yeah, I'm just going to text her. And I was like, what? Like, you're not going to text her. You're going to look at her in the face and you're going to say, hey, this isn't working out. You're cool. I'm cool. We're cool. But this just isn't a thing anymore. Thank you. And move on with your life. And he's like, well, what difference does it make? And I was like, there is a heart connection. There is an energy exchange that takes place. Not to mention the fact that when we're on text, it can be misconstrued in so many ways. Like our words are only 7% of our actual energy exchange, communication exchange. We need body language. We need tone. We need all of these inflections. We need different things in order to read the room. And so he texts her, hey, I don't want to be together anymore. She can take that 5,000 ways. Right. What if she just thought, God, I'm so ugly. Like he doesn't even want to be with me. And I'm like, do you really want her to have those thoughts when that's actually not the truth? And he looked at me and he's like, no. And I was like, that's why we have these conversations. You know, those conversations have been the thread of my existence. And I didn't know it until, you know, I paid a lot of money to figure it out.
Right? We're working with people in the workplace all the time. And 99% of the time, one of the biggest pain points is the inability to deal with conflict and the inability to actually turn conflict into connection. So when we're working with people, I mean, that is one of the first things that comes up. We teach them actually exactly what you just said about how words are this much percent. You know, it's a very tiny percentage. First filter we use in our brains is body language and tone of voice. Completely resonate with that. What do you see as some of the things that are really lacking in adult conversation?
You know, the main thing that I see with adults and the consulting that I do in corporations, those kind of things, is that with adults, we've gotten into this space where we're highly connected to our phones. Like this is our world, you know? So when this isn't in our world, we've kind of forgot how to connect with each other. And I attribute a lot of this to COVID as well, because we walked through life for 3 years with a mask over our face. We couldn't talk to each other. We couldn't see each other. It was just chaos. And so we've gotten into a space, I believe, that we're not actually talking to each other in the grocery store or waving at the neighbor. Everybody just kind of goes in and shuts the doors. It's like Edward Scissorhands, you know, like a very old movie that I am now learning how old I am because I reference these movies and nobody knows them. If you haven't seen Edward Scissorhands, see it. But it's these moments where we're just disconnected and feeling like we're connected because we're in the zone of Instagram Reels and TikTok and YouTube Shorts and. So we have this illusion that we are actually connected, but we're not, because we as humans need that energy exchange too. We need those moments of being in the same room. And in a corporation, you can tell, you can feel the vibe, and you walk in and are they excited? Is everything moving forward? Or are we just really pissed off and not wanting to be here? And then we have the trend of remote people. So now we've completely isolated ourselves in our own homes. So I think that we've just gotten out of practice of having these conversations, rando conversations, like, you're standing in line and you're like, yeah, I know, or a mom has a kid that's melting down. I'm like, I feel you. You want to go get a Starbucks and just have a conversation, just relating to each other and feeling each other and loving on each other, because we're missing that. And we're doing our best to find it in this device, and it's not going to work because we are innately connected in a heart space. And the more we drift away from that, the worse it gets. And that's where I'm doing my best to bring back that conversation piece of gathering around the fire pit with your family and having a conversation. I walk into a restaurant, and again, this is no judgment. This is an observation. I walk in, and out of 10 families, 9 families have their kids from 1 year old to 12 years old on iPads, iPhones, tablets, and nobody's talking. And it's tragic. And I'm not suggesting that we roll it all back and never have iPhones and iPads, because trust me, they save my life sometimes. I'm on a podcast. He's on a movie right now. So it saves us. And I'm not saying to not do it, but we need to carve out at least a little bit of time for each other. In the adult world, that means going to lunch together. That means taking a break together, standing around the water cooler, shooting the crap about whatever.
Yeah. So what recommendation would you have for a team leader that is leading a team that is hybrid. So they're meeting in person sometimes, but they're also remote sometimes. What advice would you have for that leader to cultivate the conversations that need to be happening?
So what I believe that would be a great way to cultivate this experience together is, especially if you're a hybrid, because again, being remote, it breaks the energy. What I will say is if you're in a hybrid and you have them together, you make that the most exciting time to be together. My friend, she does these beautiful offsites, right? And she creates like a magical offsite. She had all of these great leaders. She was working with the Gates Foundation, and they had all these great leaders come in trying to solve all of these really amazing problems. And she created this space of like a literal jungle. She brought in plants, created this jungle space. She created a card deck where they could intuitively get back in touch with their creative side. And she created this magical space where people just lit up and the most beautiful ideas came out of that space. So if I was in their shoes and I had them come as a hybrid and we all got together, I would make it magical. You might not be able to create a jungle, but you could have, some sort of gathering that is exciting, something that lights up. Bring in somebody that's creative and they do an art project or whatever that is, but really get in touch with that creative side, the side that is really longing to come out, because none of us want to sit and go over pitch decks. Like none of us want to go over one more deck about what we're doing or what we're not doing or how we can do better or what you should be doing or give us some ideas to make more money, all of those things. Like get into this human space and then the human thrives.
Right. And the other stuff comes out in that conversation. That is my experience, is absolutely that it is a byproduct of human connection. And it's way easier to have it happen that way, more organic for sure.
And when you're in flow, it's like ideas and excitement. Yeah. And we could do this and we could do that. And the most beautiful things come out of that space.
Yep.
We just get nervous as leaders of wasting time or not being efficient or being progressive or productive or all of those very masculine kind of things that we do in order to keep the business going. And I'm not saying that we don't need that, but there's a time and space for that. Right. You can do that online all day long. We can do that online. But when we're in person, let's make it a party. Like, let's make it something fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We're remote and we're based all over. We have some people that are local, some that are in a different state, some that are in different cities. We get together at minimum twice a year. I'd love to do it quarterly. And we do a big emphasis of our time is on play. And the play and the connecting time primes us that when we do sit down and we do that stuff that isn't as nearly as exciting, but it is a flow state. By the time we get there, we're all in flow and it feels really good. Ask my team instead of me. Of course, I think it does, but they tend to give it good reviews. So yeah.
You've built the energy of the space, right? We need to build the energy of the space before we go into the deep dive of, oh my gosh, we're not making budget. Right. Like you don't start off with not making budget. Like, right. It's exhausting. It's depressing. It's all of the things. And again, a lot of the leaders that I work with, they're like, I don't want to work this hard at this. And I said, listen, you're going to invest on the front end or you're going to pay on the back end. That's how it works. Yep. We're all having to put energy into this. It's just, where do you want to put it? That's the big question. And what are you willing to do? I owned a preschool for many years and the kids taught me that. Like, if I wasn't prepared, it was torture day. Like, they would string you up, literally. Like it just was torture. But if I was prepared and I set the scene for how the day was going to go, it was magical.
1,000,000%. I'm guessing that you learned all of these things over time, like most of us. And now I want to invite you to step into the confessional, that time of the show, and share what is that lesson that you learned the hard way that you really want to spare others the pain of.
Well, when we first talked about this, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so my podcast because I have messed up so many times. And again, in different arenas, right? I've owned 2 brick and mortars. So that was a preschool and a wellness center. And that's a different world than the online world, too. So it's been a lot of learning lessons. What I will say is my first entrepreneurial journey was a preschool. I was in college. My dad called me one day and said, "Hey, there's this preschool for sale. Are you interested?" And I'm like, yeah. And I happened to talk to my professor. And at the time they were like saying, yeah, you're going to make like $27,000 a year to be a teacher. And I was like, yeah, that's not going to work for me. So so I entertained this idea even more. And it was always something that I wanted to do. I was in child development in high school and advanced classes, and they had internships for me. I built a school, a mock school, all of those kind of things. So this was in my arena. So my dad took me and we walked around, and it was kind of a dump. And he said, "Hey, is there something you can do with this?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm in." It was quitting my job, literally buying the school and opening the doors as SeaWorld Learning Center. And I was 21. I had to wait until I turned 21 in order to get the actual license. And again, as a side note, everybody says, "Oh, that's not possible. That's not possible." I didn't have a college degree.
Yeah.
I didn't have a college degree. And that was a prerequisite that was mandated by the city. And they built out this whole thing because of all the internships I had done and all the things I had done to pass me through. So you never take what is said for verbatim of how it's going to go down, because that's not how mine went down. I slid through the system and I created a really cool school. With that being said, came employees, and I had no idea how to deal with employees. I was 21. I was hot-headed. I thought I knew everything. I am the best. You're going to work for me. It's going to be great as long as you do everything I say to do.
Went real well.
Yeah. And I'm like, yay me, So I went through quite a bit of staff. And what people don't understand, especially in the preschool education world, is when you go through a bunch of staff, parents kind of go up in an uproar. It's a lot of turnover. They get nervous with their kids, all the things. And again, it goes back to conversations, because I also learned, as a side note, is that to have that conversation with the parents of like, look, I have my solid 2 to 3 people. I have a revolving door on number 4. I am doing my best to get number 4 in here and be really great at what she does. But, honestly, I'm not going to even introduce her to you until I know she's good. So that was the conversation I had with them, and it calmed them down enough, to understand that, we're just going through an experience here. But this one girl in particular, she was the bane of my existence, quite frankly. She didn't move, and we're talking, I had children from ages 1 to 12 in the summertime, but throughout the school year, it was ages 1 to 7. And if you've ever wrangled 25 to 31 to 7-year-olds, you'd know that you have to get and move.
Yeah, and you do have to move.
You have to move. And so she was not a mover. And so I would say, "Hey, I need you to get up and go over here, monitor these kids, blah, 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 blah." And it was just torture, really, like over and over again. And Halloween came, and I had all these inflatable decorations. And I said, "Can you put the inflatable decorations up?" Right? She's like, "Yeah, sure." Tell me why. She blew them up, closed it, and then took a push pin and stuck it in the wall on all my inflatables. I was like, "I'm not understanding. Did you not understand that would deflate it and ruin it?" So we had moment after moment after moment. Well, one day she decides that she's really aggravated and a kid pissed her off, and she went back to do a hit.
Oh, she reached her hand to a kid.
And I literally looked at her and I go, "Get out. Get." And I was screaming. Now, mind you, this is terrifying for the children too.
Freaking out. Yeah.
He's freaking out. My other employees are like, "What the hell is going on?" I was not a screamer. I'm not a yeller. And you can't, you cannot hit other people's children. Right. You cannot yell at other people's children. It's just the rules of life, And so I said, "Get out, get out." And she goes, "What?" And I said, "Get out." And she grabs her stuff. She goes to the door, and I said, "You better run." And she ran down the street. She didn't have a car. She lived like pretty far away, but she ran. And tell me why. I chased her for 2 blocks. 2 blocks.
Oh, wow. You're in like full fight mode. Your brain had just clicked into fight mode, and you were
there was no flight there. It was all fight.
Checked out.
All fight. And I had a moment where I was like, what are you doing? You know, that moment when you're like in it and I'm running and I'm like, Heather, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like slow motion, slowed down, and then came back to myself. And I was like, oh, you need to visit this. Like, this is something you need to visit because mind you, it was a horrible thing. And truth be told, had she hit that kid, my business would have been done. I would have been sued. I would have been all over the news. Nobody would bring their child there, regardless if I said I fired her and she was terrible and all the things. It would have been over. There was a real primal of, I've built this business and you're not going to destroy it, number one. Number two, which supersedes number one altogether, which was my natural reaction of, I will kill you and maim you if you're going to hurt a child. Like, don't touch the kid. You know, deflate my inflatables, you know, fine by me. But this is a whole nother story. So I really had to start looking at how do I communicate? And she was really one of the ones that I really thought through a lot because I'm like, who doesn't know to not put a pin in an inflatable? Who doesn't know that? Lots of people don't know that. Who doesn't know to not hit the kid? I assumed as an owner that you're coming into an environment and you're not going to hit the child. That's just an assumption I made. I didn't know I had to map that out, that that's not an option. These are the deal breakers in my business. And so taking those moments and really honing them in for myself of like, what am I wanting in my business? What are deal breakers for me? And really mapping that out to any new hire that comes in of here's where we are. Here's the deal breakers. Here's where I'm flexible. Here's what I expect. Here's what that looks like. When you clean a chair, it needs to be cleaned all the way around, not just the top.
First of all, you're so not alone. Also, I started managing super young, and so I'm resonating with you on many levels, but so not alone in that what's common sense isn't common. And we tend to make so many leaps of assumption that get us into so much trouble. So how has that shaped the way that you lead today?
Well, I will tell you that now looking back, you know, Steve Jobs says that you can only connect the dots backwards, right? So looking back, I can absolutely say to myself of like, look, I was young. I didn't really know what I was doing. I did my very best. I'm learning. And in the same token, I did not set her up for success. And so for me to expect her to be everything I wanted her to be in this role, I didn't set her up for that. So how can she possibly rise to that occasion when I didn't set her up for that? So now in a different space as leading other people and in business and in life. And this translates across business. This translates into life, you know, looking at my husband when we got married. And this was shortly after this event, but looking at him and saying, here's the deal. I'm not willing to say till death do us part. I'm not willing to say in sickness and in health or all of the things that for richer or for poorer, because if you are sitting on the couch, not doing anything, and you are not trying or doing your best to make a living, I'm not staying with you. If you choose to cheat on me, I'm not staying with you. These are the rules. These are the deal breakers for me. And I call them deal breakers because everybody's very much into boundaries and boundaries and boundaries, but boundaries get broken all the time. But deal breakers, they don't get broken. That's in your core, right? Like when somebody does something to you and that's a deal breaker, I'm done. Like it's over. And people would say to me, not in sickness and in health. Listen, if he's sitting on the couch and not doing anything to get better, and that could be a chronic illness even, you know, there are alternative therapies, there is mind things, there mindsets, there's all sorts of things that we can do. As long as you're participating in life, I'm in. We're growing together, I'm in. And that girl in particular taught me that lesson, but she taught me the lesson of figure out what your deal breakers are. Have that conversation with the person so that they know where they stand. People do this all the time with like, even when relationships, like I want to have a baby, but they don't tell their significant other that they want to have a baby. And maybe the other one says, I don't want to have a baby. And then 7 months later, you're mad at him because he doesn't want to have a baby. And I'm like, but he said that.
Believe people when they tell you something. Believe them. Believe people the first time they tell you something. Don't think you're going to change their deal breaker. Just your will.
Yes. And, again, this was nothing against her either. She was young. She's figuring out life. Like, I did not set her up for a success. That was my problem. That was my fault. And I need to do better next time. So consequently, every employee after that, I would be like, here's the deal. And my one girl, she challenged me. She looked at me and I said, listen, I'm taking this day off. She goes, I wanted that day off. I said, you didn't talk to me or convey that at all. I've already made plans, but I'm happy to give you the next weekend off. No, it's for something this weekend. And I said, well, I expected you to work and you did not let me know. So I'm going to expect you to be here. And she says, well, I'm not going to. Now, I, as a leader, have to be able to say, okay. And let her go. And I didn't get to do what I wanted to do. I ended up working, but it was a deal breaker for me. No, we didn't have a conversation about this. So that's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. I don't think that you have to acquiesce to everybody either. Mm-hmm. I don't think that that's necessary, but to have a real clear conversation. I say this all the time. The first person you need to have a conversation with before you have a conversation with anybody is yourself. What am I wanting? What is the energy that I'm bringing to it? What's my inspired action? Those are the 3 steps, because if you go into any conversation angry, frustrated, annoyed, a laundry list of things that they've done, it's not going to be a successful conversation. It's just not.
Yes, 1,000,000%. Oh, Heather, this has been an incredible conversation. Thank you for sharing. I want you to tell people, if they are listening and they're like, oh, I want her to come speak. I want to learn more about what she does. Where can people find you? How do they connect with you?
Well, it's simple. Just heathercriswell.com. You can find me on there. You can find me on Amazon for the books, and everything's on my website. All the connections to every social media is on my website. So it's just kind of the easiest way to go. I'm happy to help anybody in this space, because I really think that, again, going back to one conversation can change your life. One conversation that I had with you guys via email changed my life today. I got to hear something new. I thought, oh, I've never really told that story. That's a really good story. All of these things from just this one conversation. So I'm incredibly grateful for you doing this and for having these conversations for the rest of us to learn and grow. It's so important.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm sure we just barely scratched the surface. We will probably have to have you back again and continue the conversation. I feel like we just got started. Thank you so much, Heather. And we will drop all of your links or your website link below. We'll make sure you're easy to access for everyone. We appreciate you. You have so many valuable skills that all of us need. So thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, until next time, friends, go manage like a leader.
Thanks for being part of this community of revolutionary leaders who believe honest communication, healthy conflict, and building cultures of acceptance, respect, and trust are not only possible, but non-negotiable for cultivating world-class teams. If one-to-one coaching, engaging workshops, or strategic planning that is actually useful are anything that interests you, make sure to head over to transcendleadershipcollective.com to check out our free resources. Confessions of a Terrible Leader is hosted by Lacey Nelson and produced by Mary Scott. Music is by Leif Olson and Mary Scott from the band The Number of Months. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave us a review. And until next time, go manage like a leader.